Sup guys, welcome to another virtual tasting. Fabian and I are here. We're about to jump into one of my personal favorite wines in the bottle right now, which is our 2019 Wild Ferment Pinot Noir. So there's a lot of different things I like about this wine. And we'll talk about the details of that. So I'll let you do the honors and start opening it up for everybody at home. Hopefully you guys have this bottle in front of you. If you don't know who we are, so I'm Jasper Riddle. I'm the owner of Noisy Water Winery, and this is Fabian, who is our head winemaker at the winery. We're both the two members of the winemaking team that kind of were responsible for the inspiration on this one. Now you don't have Richard Piedmont here from the vineyard. You don't have a lot of our other people. So there is a big group that gets together and makes all these decisions. And we got the opportunity to talk to some really cool friends about the ideas on this. But so a few different things going on. I'll break them down, quickly quickly right now, and we'll go in detail here in a second. We have wild ferment, so we'll talk about that. So we're talking about indigenous yeast consuming sugar and making alcohol, which is something you and I don't play around with a whole lot. Kind of scares us usually in the winery. We'll talk about the approach to that in a minute. You also have Angle fruit. So you have old vine Pinot Noir from Angle, from our vineyard in the Forbidden Desert, which is another cool thing. And then we also have carbonic maceration. So those three things together, plus the fact the way this wine shows, because it didn't see a lot of oak, and it saw. It's so pretty and so fruity that I think it's totally different than what you get. And then the textural components of the mouthfeel are really, really unique to me because of what you see from that carbonic maceration and just some of the different fruit flavors and aromas I'm getting from the Pinot itself are not something I varietally see that often in America. So I think it's a really unique style. If you guys haven't had this and you've had like our reserve Pinot, totally different wine, right? But same grapes, so you guys got to think, okay, wow, like this is the brevity that you have for Pinot Noir. So with that, let's go ahead and I guess I'll do us the honors and go ahead and pour. You guys have not seen the label. That's the label there, which is a cool label. You see a little kind of blown up diagram of what yeast might look like in the background there, because we are talking about wild fermentation. Ooh, look at that rocking there, huh? So one of the things I think I would like to point out is with this, we did not do didn't achieve final like a finished filtration on this, right? We left it a little rougher, if I remember.
A little bit, yeah. I think we only went down like 3 microns, maybe 7 even. So pretty semi-filtered.
So we scrub it up for you guys at home. You're like, well, microns, what are you talking about? So we scrubbed it up, but that's not like it's gonna be crystal clear. So you might see a little more in it. It may not be as like crystal clear see-through as usual. You might have, some Pinots you might have a little more in there. And one of the things I kind of noticed in this varietal overall. One thing for you guys at home, I personally like to chill this down a little more. So I think we're probably like around 62 degrees right now.
Cellar temperature.
Yeah, cellar temperature. I just like it a little colder. I think it's nice and it's warm outside. So
sure.
That's somewhere I like this individualized wine. But walk us through a little bit just your approach, what you get. Let's go through the kind of basic tasting crash notes for everybody at home. So if you guys haven't done one of these with us before, you can download the tasting form and you can kind of sit down and try it side by side. So pause the video here and there, stop and say, okay, look, we're going to taste it, we're going to see it, all that good stuff. But we're really going to more talk about the wine itself because there's a lot to talk about on this wine.
Sure.
So go ahead, David, I'll let you take it away.
So yeah, first off, looking at the visual of this wine, don't have any white paper in front of me, but looking through the side of it right now, it's just pretty. It's got a really nice hue to it, kind of like a ruby. I don't see any garnet to it. Again, this wine didn't see any aging, so I'm not expecting to see any garnet, or not as much aging, I should say. I think it was only like 6 to 9 months, right?
Yeah, we were looking for neutral oak. I remember that on the program. So we didn't really we wanted to add a little bit of that micro ox that you get from the barrel, but we weren't looking to impart a bunch of oak on this.
Sure.
Because I think stylistically we were trying to showcase fruit. And we were trying to showcase what the native yeast bring to the wine itself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I agree with you. It's not, it's not like the biggest, boldest Pinot in the glass.
Yeah, you can see right through it almost. I can see light coming through, and it is like a nice, really ruby color to me. Really pretty, and that's you're gonna hear me say that multiple times through this whole tasting. Is like this is one of the prettiest wines I think we've produced. There's no better word for me to describe it. It's just pretty. So yeah, looking at it, looks beautiful. Give it a little swirl on the nose. Again, pretty nice, bright fruit.
Yeah, I get like, you know, kind of cherries, raspberries, just kind of
Almost pomegranate.
I could see
that might be the
pomegranate as
color
well.
influencing my mind, but yeah, it's just kind of like pomegranate on the nose as well. And then, you know, tasting it again, it's fruit forward. I think bone dry. It almost like sucks everything out of your mouth, you know.
It does.
Decent tannin structure, not super bold. It's not going to be like, you know, curtain call or absolution or even reserve cab. I think it's like a step down even from our reserve Pinot Noir. Really easy and I think well balanced. Reminds me a little bit of like cranberry on the palate for sure. Nice and easy, just super well balanced and light. Light to medium body, I'd say.
Yeah,
So,
for me, I'd say medium body. You know, I think on the back label we show it being off dry, but that's not from a residual sugar standpoint. I think that's just from people that know our dry as being like big and massive and super oaky and super tannic. Where this is softer and it shows fruitier, and it's not that there's residual sugar in here. And I know that that's kind of the descriptor of the dryness sale. But I think we were trying to say like, look, it showcase a lot more fruit, and you see a lot more fruit, and you're not seeing all this oak and vanilla. It's more of those ripe fruit characteristics, and yeah, you do get that dryness coming through for sure. Like you said, it's pulling it right out of your mouth, and it's I personally think it's it's a gorgeous bottle of wine, right? How many synonyms are we gonna have for the word pretty today? But it's it showcases the fruit so well, and that's one of the things I like about this is when you have the opportunity to really just have that fruit jumping out of the glass at you, but you still have some roundness to it and some complexity to it. You know, sometimes things can be fruity, but they're just fruit bombs. Like they're fruity and then that's it, and then they fall on the palate and they're flat and they're flabby, and this is really just I think beautiful. So good job on this one. You know,
there's a little hint of like minerality in there too.
You know, so I would argue that is the Angle minerality.
Sure.
So Angle, New Mexico, the Forbidden Desert, is near to the consequences. You guys have probably heard about it. And Richard, my uncle, is our vineyard manager and takes care of that with all the love. And it was an old vineyard that was kind of on its way out, and we gave those old vines new life and came back in and purchased the vineyard a couple years ago. This will be now our third year farming that vineyard. But Angle is a totally different landscape. It's, if you've never been there, which most people have never been to Angle, New Mexico, it's like the Wild West, the last frontier, and you have a lot of that clay, but you have a lot of sandy loam soil out there as well too. But if you look back, you do get it's kind of old seabed. It's that old seabed. So I do see this kind of like minerality and a little bit of almost like, I don't want to say saltiness, but I do get like that slight kind of like seabed taste to it. Which I know you guys are at home like, well, he's licking seabeds, but it's just something for me. If I have wine from those regions, you see that come through. And I've had it like before. I recently had wine from one of the regions there in Mexico that was right by the ocean, and it like tasted like you had salt in the wine. Sure. It really, you could really taste that coming through. Maybe too much for me, but I do think there's a unique Angle terroir that I'm starting to see on some of these wines, which is cool for you guys at home because it's something I don't see anywhere else in the state of Mexico. Is what's coming from that soil there. Outside of that, let's talk about the fermentation process. Sure. Because in this is the part to me that's fun, because we're talking grapes from our vineyard and yeast from our vineyard, and how do we achieve that is cool. But also, why would you not, as a commercial winemaker, usually pick that your style of fermentation?
So, I mean, the main thing is that I would be worried about fermentation completing. That's going to be my main concern. Starting is an issue. Being healthy, you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know how much nitrogen you're going to need during the fermentation. And you just might get some funky flavors and things like that.
Right, you might be getting out-competed by something else, right? So yeast is not the only thing that wants to eat sugar.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of those things that want to eat sugar that we don't want in the winemaking process.
Mm.
So that's one of the big concerns about a indigenous fermentation, a wild fermentation,
Sure.
using the native yeast from the area, because grapes are complete. They're the only alcohol that has the ability to really make itself, right?
Sure.
I guess you can put the asterisk by honey as well.
Sure.
But that's really it. Beer can't make itself. Distillates can't make themselves. So wine really is complete in that sense, because the yeast is living on the skin that can create the fermentation itself. But we've selected over the past hundreds of years of commercial viability in the industry these strains that are tried and true, because we know that we're able to control that. And the beer industry's done it. Everybody's done it,
Sure.
right? You have these ones that are the workhorses of the industry, and you know what they do and how they do it and what they perform. But a lot of things I think we're looking for is that they perform, right? That
Absolutely.
they start and they finish. Because for you as a commercially viable winemaker, you have a finite amount of tasting space in your winery, right? Or a tank space in your winery. So you don't have the time for something to stall out and take 2 months, 3 months on fermentation during harvest. So why now, to walk us through how this goes and what we did to achieve that in the winery.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we sprinkled some Gaia.
So that's the name for, I'm going to try it. It is Metasketchwana fricolia. Meshnikovia fricolia.
Yeah.
So that's a strain of yeast that is non-fermentive.
Yes.
So it's not going to consume sugar. So basically what it does is it just blankets, right?
Blankets
so
and
blanking
outcompetes.
and it outcompetes. So it's keeping all the things you and I worry about, that like Brettanomyces, the demon in the winery, or any of these other things, or lactobacillus or any of this other stuff. It keeps it out up front. It blankets it, so it's starting a fermentation, but it's not consuming sugar. So it eats something totally different that we're not using as part of the winemaking process. And that gives our native yeast culture time to build and start consuming, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead, jump in.
Well, and so I will say, I think there's a combination of like the wild yeast that come in with the grapes, but also I think we probably do have a little bit of like a natural or like a wild yeast in the winery as well. And I think our yeast in the winery and in the vineyard are both pretty healthy. So I think in that situation, then once Gaia does its thing, then we allow our native yeast to come in and basically just start doing work with healthy grapes without other bacteria interfering. They come in and they can do their thing. I think the fermentation was a little bit slow starting. Once it started going, it was nice, and then it finished strong. And I mean, the acidity, the brightness, like the flavors, like all these things are just pronounced on this wine that I think can be somewhat dominated once you use like D254 or other yeast strains that are very common. But this, I think, lets you showcase the flavors of the vineyard, the fruit, and the winemaking process. And so you get this like complexity. You get the minerality.
Now, I would never try this without pretty fruit.
Oh, for sure.
And if you didn't have gorgeous fruit, you can't try it. So that's where I give my uncle a big hug. That's where you buy him a 6-pack of beer, right? We know how to bribe the man. But that's where you thank him for being able to even try it with just amazing, immaculate fruit coming out of the vineyard. And then let's go into the next step of that fruit. The weird thing we did, which we allowed it to be a little carbonic. So it wasn't like full-blown carbonic in the sense that we didn't have closed chamber. Now for Nuevo Nouveau, if you haven't had that was full-blown carbonic. But for us, we were very, very we tried to be kind of reductive, and we tried to keep the oxygen out, and we didn't crush the berry, so we went whole berry in there, which I think is cool. So we destemmed it, so we got it off of that, so it wasn't a whole cluster, but we went whole berry in there and let it go, and you let that sit there and kind of start working. And I think that shows adds up to me a roundness to the mouthfeel. I've noticed that from a lot of whole cluster, whole berry wines I've had, they have more of a roundness to them. And then for you, I mean, your team, that means you're not pumping over, right? It means you're not pumping over a lot up front. You're letting that culture build because it is slower. You're letting those berries sit. And so the fermentation starting the berries themselves, the individualized grapes themselves versus in this container with the juice and the skins all broken up and mixed in, the seeds mixed in. And so I think it does give a little bit of complexity. And it built that way probably halfway through the process, right? And then we came back in and then we started to pump over. Because you then, at some point in time as a winemaker, you're like, it has to finish.
Let's help it.
Do your job. And so we actually let it go, I think, almost all the way down. So I think I think the native yeast ate about 2/3 or 3/4 of all the sugar in the wine, and then we did pick a strain of yeast to come in and finish.
Just to
They achieve the alcohol you want, because native yeast, that's the thing with native yeast, is they can't eat, most of them can't consume more than about 7 to 10% alcohol.
Sure.
So this is, I think, floating around 13. 13%. So and that's where we were. Bricks at Harvest, 24.1. And if you guys, aren't used to this, our Truth in Winemaking's there. So we'll tell you what we have in the bottle while it's there. So you know, on the back label, so we, our steps and where it was. We're not trying to keep any secrets. I just think the biggest secret we have is the fact that we have this cool vineyard in the middle of nowhere that no one else has fruit from.
Yeah.
So that's something exciting for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what else about this would you like to tell everybody at home? And so yeah, guys, at home, right? It is just this fruitier, prettier bottle of wine than standard Pinot. I think like a lot of Pinot can be just try to be like too big and bold and too massive, and I think this is totally different. I think a lot of our friends from France would argue that this is probably the way they like to see Pinot Noir showcased.
Sure. Yeah.
I think a lot of people would argue that, and Luna agrees. She came in to agree with us. But yeah, I think that's a big, a big part of it. But yeah, what else would you like to say about it?
I mean, again, it's just a really well balanced, pretty wine, easy to drink. I think the carbonic maceration had something to do with the tannin structure of this wine. Not being over the top. I could see like how some people might not be into the tannin structure of our reserve Pinot Noir, even though I'm like all about it.
Right.
But this wine is just like a nice step down from that, to where it's just easy on the palate. It's not going to just coat your teeth with tannins.
Right.
You're going to get that fresh fruit every single sip.
I think it's my wife's favorite bottle of wine that we produce.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I think we drank half of what we produced at home this past year. And for me, it's one of my top favorite bottles. If you're looking for, and I like pairing with non-food items. Everybody kind of knows about me. At one point in time, our labels showed like what I would do with this bottle of wine. But I think it's a fun way to look at it. But yeah, I think for me, this is that afternoon red.
Sure.
Slight chill. 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. You're ready for a glass of wine. I think this is there for you. I think it can carry on, from there forward. Sometimes I drink a ton of rosé and white wine, and this is something for me. I'm not like, it's 90 degrees outside. I'm not necessarily reaching for cab right away. That's too big for me if I'm going out and trying to mow my yard, right? That's not what I'm getting into. So, I don't know. That's where I would kind of put this. Where would you experience this bottle of wine? Where would you like to see it?
I agree with you. 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, you can have a bottle or two of this. Pretty easy, I think, with a group of friends. It's like a little bit bigger than rosé. Not everybody's into rosé, and so this one would be a nice step up from there, I think. And charcuterie.
Oh yeah, nice little charcuterie board, and this is a good combo. I think it's gorgeous. I hope everybody at home thinks it's beautiful. I don't think we have a lot of it left, actually. Which is crazy, right? Because it's like this release that,
what did we do?
200 cases.
200 cases, yeah.
Now this is the 2019 vintage. We do have a 2020 vintage. They'll be following up here sooner than later. But I think it's fun to release and showcase this to you guys, because quite honestly, this is one that's just going to be, it's going to be consumed. Yeah. It's a program I'd love to build. Sure. Because it's,
absolutely.
I think from the winemaking standpoint, you wouldn't want to have wild fermentation going on in your whole entire winery. I think that's like madness, and you need to have more tank space than known to man. But I think for us to build this and showcase, New Mexico fruit with New Mexico yeast, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. And stylistically totally different. For those of you all at home, if you're like, I really had something weird and I want you guys to try to do this, we're down to try it. We are down to get weird. I think that is definitely one of our mottos at the winery. So let us know. If there's something out there that you're like, hey, try this, do this with it. We'd absolutely be on board. But any other final thoughts you have for our group at home? Where do you see this going? Anything else that you'd like to put out there for them? Because this was my program when it came out. It's
Mhm.
going to be your program the next vintage year.
Yeah, I think I'd like to duplicate this. I think potentially like to try something a little bit slightly lighter. And yeah,
So maybe pick it a little earlier.
yeah, maybe like a wild ferment rosé.
Ooh, wild ferment rosé. I like it.
You know,
I like
that
it.
might be the thing to do. So we'll see. We can play around with it. We got plenty of Pinot, so.
And this is, I mean, up to this point in time, this is one of the few wild ferment wines we put out.
Mhm.
But this is the only one that's out to the
Mhm.
public right now.
Yep.
So if you guys are digging on the wild ferment and what the native yeast does, let us know. We can do some more of it too. We can
absolutely.
play around some different varietals.
It's pretty.
It comes down to pretty fruit,
Yeah.
and we have to have the fruit for it.
Yep.
And we definitely trust the hippie running the vineyard to take care of that for us and make sure we have the, you know, those are his favorite children, I think.
Mhm.
Hopefully my cousins aren't watching this, but you know, it's, you know, he's checking on it every single day and making sure that it's looking beautiful and showcasing beautifully. And this gets me, this is you're probably not gonna hear this, but drinking this gets me excited about this year's harvest because it shows me, because it reminds me of what wine's like in the tank. You know, it reminds me that, and I like that. I think that's the fun part. I mean, it's
For sure.
harvest from a winemaking standpoint is definitely madness.
I'm ready for harvest because I'm ready to be done with bottling. So
yeah, bottling's monotonous, harvest
Yeah.
is madness, and everything else is well, there's nothing else in the wine industry, right?
Yeah.
So, but you know, guys, ask us questions, reach out, let us know what you think about the wine. We'd love to chat with you about it. We hope you enjoyed this, and please keep drinking Noisy Water wine and order more. You know how to get it. So thank you guys, Fabian. Cheers as always. Great
Cheers.
job on this, and
Yeah.
we will cheers you guys soon.
cheers, guys.